G'day folks, talk to Clint Newton, the CEO for the RLPA, Rugby League Players Association. So it's a collective body that holistically looks after the welfare of professional rugby league players in Australia under the NRL, National Rugby League. Well, there's a lot of teams, a lot of individuals, male and female, that can turn to Clint and his team when they got questions, or where he's already on the front foot with this anyway and with his team when it's got to do with collective bargaining agreement, with contracts. They got all sorts of different programs to make sure across the board active players now are looked after. But what happens when you've got not just season-ending injuries that can derail your career? Then what happens? Where's the transition? When you retire, you've put 10 years in running the paddock hard. Where does life go from there? Sometimes people don't have that next door to open once one closes. So it's tapping into the team and powerhouse team. Like you've got Clint, former professional rugby league player himself, Newcastle Knights, with the Melbourne Storm, where he won a premiership, Penrith Panthers. He's played overseas. Yeah, he's got plenty of lived experience. He knows what he's talking about, knows what he's doing, and he's passionate about it. And it was awesome having the yarn and seeing that passion and how he articulated the welfare that's going on today, where it started way back when, and the pipeline. And all the active players, some that are on the board and within the RLPA itself. So with their respective clubs, the information that they do gather of the mechanics of how teams work, what's right, what's wrong, they can bring that back to the board, share some of that knowledge, and just continuously keeping people safe in that professional environment. And the NRL are doing a great job with that product, and that continues to grow. And the RLPA will continue with that. Iron sharpens iron. Not to mention that this bloke is the son of Jack Newton, golfing legend, golfing royalty. So apart from his busy schedule with the RLPA, he continues his work also with the Jack Newton Classic, or looking after the juniors with the foundation, nurturing a whole breeding ground of youngsters that want to swing in the club. And who knows, one day could be playing for the PGA or live now. It's all happening. So he doesn't mind having a chop with the old club, and I'm glad he can continue that on through his father's name with his family. Doing solid work, brother. You don't muck around. So it's going to be great to see what's going to be down the pipeline in the future for the RLPA and everything else that you're doing. So if you like the podcast, hit that subscribe or follow button. And we've also got a Patreon page. The link is within the description. So if you want to roll with the squad and become a patron, that'd be great. And want to thank our sponsors, Permobil Australia, the greatest electric wheelchairs in the land. Wouldn't be sitting in anything else but these four wheels right here. And they've got great assistive tech also. So righto, let's get into it. Clint Newton, brother, thanks for coming down here and having a yarn with me, mate. Appreciate it.
No worries, pleasure.
Mate, before we get into the solid work that you're doing with the Rugby League Players Association, the RLPA, mate, and just knowing, like, and you're looking at your father, the great Jack Newton, and golf, but what led you more towards rugby league instead of swinging the club? So we just get it, so listeners can get a bit of an origin about who you are and where you're from and all that.
Yeah, I think it was something that, I mean, early on, like most kids, you're never truly sure what you want to pursue. Even when I left school, I still didn't quite know what I wanted to pursue outside of the dream of maybe playing rugby league. But our family was just always around sport, obviously largely because of Dad's history. My mum had really no sport background at all. She'd come from London as a model over there and grew up in Dulwich and travelled a fair bit of the world there and met Dad whilst he was playing on the European tour. So she used to attend sporting events based on some of the things that she used to have to do. But Dad's family and his history, having grown up in the Hunter Valley in Cessnock and other family members around that sort of Wangi area and whatnot, it was very big on sport. And Dad played everything growing up, cricket, soccer, rugby league, and didn't pick up a golf club until he was probably in his early teens, and that came about through early on, sort of probably around sort of between 12, I suppose, and they were his mum's clubs, because his dad didn't play. His dad then taught himself to play, and then became a scratch marker in the space of a few years, and then so it was always around our family. I was never gifted with the most athletic ability, and so my sister was blessed with a lot of that. And,
being a bit modest there, brother.
No, well, I mean, it was rare that I'd find myself on the podium at running carnivals or swimming carnivals. It was always that, that fifth spot in the relay team. So
pass me the baton.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just, but I had to go at everything and I think when I look back on my life, I think watching my father and mum get on with things, they were very much of that mindset of just having a go at everything. And so because I was small when I was younger, I was considerably small compared to, say, the bigger people in my year. I found myself playing cricket and soccer and tennis and golf and those types of things, but I didn't play rugby league. And Dad was always very big on you're not playing rugby league until you are sort of big enough. But the tipping point was when I went into sort of year 7, year 8, which was when I was 12. So he just said, you're not playing until there because you're not big enough. And I think that because of the delay in holding me back, it was that sort of delayed gratification and something that I was working towards. And I think by nature of being told you're too small to play right now, I think then spurred me on in some way subconsciously to say, well, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I continue. Well, I may not be big enough when I start playing league, but I'm going to do things to make sure I give this a red hot crack. And then when I started playing rugby league, I was on the wing. I was in 3rd division. I wasn't much good.
You're on the wing?
Yeah. And that's where they usually put the kids that can't play that well back in those days. So, but I was just fortunate that I was at a good club at Valentine, where we had a lot of really quality players that accepted me in their team. And golf was interesting for me, but it was also one of those things that I didn't have the passion to train. Like, I didn't have the passion to go and do it. I loved the team.
A lot of hours.
Yeah.
And as an individual compared to what you're about to say, being in a team.
Yeah, and being in the team and being a part of something where I liked that collaboration, team environment, collegial feel. I loved contact as well. Like, I loved wrestling with my mates and messing around. And golf just didn't seem to resonate in that way. I struggled to connect with some of the kids when they were playing because, again, I think you carried a bit of stigma there where because I was the son of Jack, people would look at the clubs you're using or the bag you wear. And I was just using hand-me-down clubs. It didn't matter to me, but it was just that sort of, I suppose, that environment. And this was, inside my dad's junior golf foundation that he started in '86. It just didn't fit well. So I'd hated practicing for golf.
Yep.
I just wanted to go to the range and just try and hit drivers like all the time and just smash it. Whereas league or to train for league, I would get on my BMX at 5:30 in the morning and ride down to the gym as a 12-year-old. Scan your card, go in and start doing weights, and
So you're into it back then.
Yeah, and that's sort of where it was. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And did he, regardless of the sport that you chose, so that your family had your back 100%, they weren't sort of going, oh, you might want to keep having a crack at, getting the clubs out and hitting balls? Like, it was never that at all?
No, Dad was very big on, I'm never going to pressure you, to play anything that you don't want to play. His big thing was, don't do it if you're not going to have a red hot crack. Don't waste your time doing it. So if you want to pursue golf, great. If you want to, pursue, soccer, great. League, great. Whatever it is you want to do, piano, guitar, whatever you want to do, give it a go. Don't come back and sort of say, oh, well, I didn't have a go. I should have tried harder, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. He was very big on just, I will back you, but if you want to go and pursue that, you got to make sure that you're all in, and then we'll support you 100%. And of course, they would have supported me anyway. But to have two parents that were always there, that Dad would be, my hardest taskmaster, and at times, with brutal honesty. But that's the way I was brought up. That's also the way I am now, very direct in how we go about things. I've probably got a little bit more understanding of EQ and empathy and compassion in various areas, but
because earlier off camera you said you got 3 girls, was it?
Yeah.
That would soften you up a bit, or what?
Yeah, but then when you're trying to raise 3 independent girls, it's a double-edged sword there.
Yeah.
And I think later in life I'm going to reap the benefits of that, because
nice.
At the moment our 2-year-old, that you have to until she gets tangled up with her arms like a straitjacket, she won't ask for help to get in her clothes. So particularly frustrating when you're looking to leave in the house quickly. But yeah, I think that was he never did that. And then once I sort of they saw me training all the time, like they saw me training and committing to something, I think ultimately their confidence grew in saying, right, okay, well we're going to support you. And Mum was obviously such a huge supporter and influence in my life around how she, from packing my lunches to putting me in a position where I was ready to go to the gym, or getting home from school or whatever. And I was very fortunate that I had a father that chose to go back to work and didn't just sit in the corner and cry about his accident. And I had a mother that was fully supportive of my father, but we had ultimately a home that was conducive to people pursuing their dreams and being provided with the support that you needed to do it, and feeling like that, okay, if you fail, we're going to be there to help pick you back up and go again if this is genuinely something that you want to have a go at, which I know isn't available to every family.
Yeah, and it's good to see that, like, on both sides of the field. And what I see, whether it's you got a disability or not, just where the fire can be forged and perseverance can evolve from that. And whether that, can echo through to other family members or whatever it may be, but it sounds like you had a solid foundation there. And was the Newcastle scene always healthy with rugby league up in that area? Like, I just assumed so.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
and was there any SG, and what was the go? Was it SG, Harold Matts, or how'd all that sort of roll on through to the Knights?
Yeah. Well, when the Knights came in '88, there's a whole lot of there was some pushback and hesitation, I think, from the country rugby league, ultimately because of the fact that Newcastle was a hotbed for rugby league talent. I mean, they'd produced so many fantastic internationals and players that were playing at obviously the New South Wales level prior to the ARL coming in and really establishing itself as a national rugby league type competition. So that was always very strong, but Knights and the Newcastle and Hunter region was an area that was really untapped from a professionalism perspective, and guys like your Lee Morns and whatnot had worked hard to lobby and lobby the then CEO and chair. You had your Quayle and Arthurson and whatnot there to try and say, hey, we want to come in. And they took a punt, albeit a calculated risk, in bringing Newcastle in. And I really believe that Newcastle has been, one of the great investments in the game for junior talent that then transitioned into senior talent. And obviously you can see what the Knights bring to the table now. But I was never picked in Harold Matts or SG Ball or anything like that, because I just simply wasn't good enough. and it wasn't until I was 16, that I got picked in my first rep team, and whilst I was playing at South Newcastle, and then from there, then I got put in the Knights training squad, which was just a sliding doors moment where I'd been picked in a representative team to represent really the Hunter Academies, or the different academies that exist. So you've got the Hunter Academy, and then you've got your Central Coast and Westerns and South Coast and whatnot. So I won the best player in that year for the Hunter Academy. And just on the Knights trial day, they had a national team match, which I got selected in.
And did you go to Hunter Sports High up that way, or?
No, I went to St Mary's Gateshead. So it was just across the road.
Yep.
And then fortunate enough, they said, oh, well, because you are in that team, bypass the trials, but you'll be in the summer squad, but hey, you're probably just going to make up the numbers. Like, we don't think you're probably going to make it this year, and those types of things that was sort of said to me at the time with the selectors. And I don't think they said it with any intent to hurt
that brutal
me,
honesty.
But I think they were trying to somehow soften the blow of, if you don't get selected, don't worry. But for me, I would take that as, well, that's a challenge. You're throwing it down, and I'm gonna take that on, and you're not going to tell me that I'm here to make up the numbers. That's not how our family operate. So then, lo and behold, trained very well in that off season, played, and again that sort of came about through. I ended up playing the first game against Manly in Jersey Flegg, and came off the bench, scored 2 tries, and then started literally the rest of the year. We just got beat in the grand final by Canterbury back then, who had a gun side with Matt Utai and Roy Asatazi and those sort of guys playing, and then literally 18 months later I play first grade. So that's how quickly it went from sort of very much on the outskirts and not even in the top sort of 50 in the area, to then 18 months, 2 years later, I'm making my debut at 19 and playing for my childhood club.
Yeah. And what was it like under Brian Smith? He seemed like a bit of a taskmaster, right? Like all coaches, but how was it being underneath him? And, because you have a lot of different coaches, different philosophies, and it means something different to every individual. But what was it like under him, and did you take anything from him that you still utilise today?
Yeah, Brian was obviously an interesting guy. I just think he had a different sort of thought process to how myself and others went about it. That's not saying that, he was wrong and I was right. It was just very much about Newcastle was a very unique club, and Brian had obviously been a part of Sydney-based clubs, which I think is very different to when you come into a community-based club like the Knights were, and very much it's a roots and all club. Like, so when someone leaves or someone goes, or if something happens, the community feel it. No different to when they won the grand final. You look at those types of scenes haven't really been seen, in my view, by any other team. Given what we saw after '97, that epitomises why.
Yeah, and the Johns brothers and all that.
Knights are what they are, and so he was a hard taskmaster. He was very 1% focused, which I think we needed absolutely. Hagues was a fantastic man manager. He had some great rugby league IP. He managed a complex playing group, a fantastically talented playing group, but a complex group, with some of the characters.
Because you would have been under him a fair bit longer than when you were at the Knights with Hagues,
Hagues was there from 01. He came in towards the back end of sort of 2000 when Warren Ryan departed or had a bit of a fallout with the club, and then Hagues came in and he became the first grade coach, and he stayed there then till 06. So through my time, I'd had Hagues there for the full amount of time of his coaching career, and Brian again. I think just our philosophies on how we go about things is different. I'm very much rising tides floats or boat stuff.
I'm glad you said that and not ships, because boats is individuals.
Yes.
I say canoes, so we're on the same path there.
So I think that's always been, my mentality, where I thought the environment that was created there was very much dog eat dog, and no one felt safe, which I understand there may have been some
Position-wise, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. Where the team would change literally the day of the game. Even in the sheds pre-game, the team would change, where people would drop out of the team, or someone would come in that hadn't thought they were going to play. That was sort of where I was being positioned, where each week you'd be told that you're not playing this week, and each week I would play. So it's just the psychological.
And what kind of anxiety would that create within the atmosphere?
I just thought it completely destroyed the way in which players were going out and working together for collective success. And I just thought it just completely eroded it, because what it meant was, I'm not safe, and if I'm not safe, then I have to look after my patch, and I'm only going to do that. I'm not going to look after anyone else. I'm not going to help anyone else, because ultimately, if I help someone else, then they could actually get the jump on me, because this is the way they're interchanging, rather than the mentality of, know your role, know what's required. Really good teams and good cultures, they have the ability to, one, understand what's expected of them, but also understand that if they aren't selected, they know why. And it's just the coaching that's required technically to improve the area of why they're not selected, I genuinely don't know why I've been dropped. And that was really where it was at Newcastle, where people were coming in and out of the team. And so it was really problematic for culture.
Would you have player influence as well? Because if you're looking at the Johns brothers and stuff like that, would there be, because you got individuals that are at the top of their game there, and you see it in other sports and whatnot, but would there be a bit of that going on? Or?
Well, again, at that time, Joey was playing in 2007.
And that would have been later in his career anyway.
Well, it was the last year of his career. So we still had, Badiris and Simpson and McDougall had come back from Souths. And we had obviously Kurt Gidley and Josh Perry and Joey. We had George Carmont. Anthony Quick. We had a really strong team. At Kirk Reynoldsson, and so we had a strong team, and we were going okay for the first half a dozen odd rounds, where I think we were sitting sort of like in the top five, maybe fifth or something, and then we played Canberra. In Canberra, we got beat. And there was a couple of issues that came out of that game, but Joey had sort of kinked his neck a bit in that game, and then at training the week leading into the next game, we were playing opposed, and he had a collision with Daniel Abraham, and then that's what retired Joey.
I remember this now with his neck, yeah.
And so therefore he was then gone, I think it was about round 7, and then I'd played, I think, a couple more games, and then departed after the Brisbane loss, and obviously went to Melbourne. But I think going back to the first part about Brian, retrospectively, and when I reflected on various things, because I was hurt by the way it sort of played out, but also my silence of what was going on in the club damaged me publicly as well, because I'd committed to Chief that I wouldn't come out publicly and say what was going on privately, because I wanted to protect the club's brand. And
a lot of blokes that don't, if you've got that mental stigma going on too, like sort of bringing that out in the atmosphere.
Well, ultimately I got hammered, because of the fact that everyone said, oh, you're jumping off, a sinking ship type thing, because we got beat 71-6 by the Broncos. But the issue is the fact that, that was my 100th game. I told all the senior players that it was going to be my last game. And then leading into that, and also it came about because of the fact that I'd found out that I was getting shopped around in England, and to be sold, to be either sold or just transferred.
Sport's brutal, eh?
Yeah, and so because I had a British passport,
Your mum, yeah, true.
So that all came about where I was getting phone calls from people saying, "Oh, are you aware that this is going on?" And it also came on
You
the
got
back
Leeds
of,
Rhinos, buddy, giving you a call and whatnot.
and it also came on the back of me playing in the country team and then wanting to back up, and play for the Knights that weekend. And then I was told, no, you're not, because you're not good enough to back up. And those, even after just playing representative footy.
That would light a fire.
And so, things like, you don't owe the club anything and you don't have to back up. And I was like, well, this is everything that is against my philosophy. And I was certainly no superstar, but I believed in the club ethos about how we would go about things. And I got, left out of the team. They got beat by 40 against the Dogs. I played. He'd also said leading into that game that he no longer wanted me at the club and that I was better off in England and I'd be great over in England and that I should leave. And so that was when I said to the senior players that I'm going to go. I don't know where I'm going, which I didn't. And then I think the tipping point for me was kind of, again, not the tipping point because it had gone, but the real nail was in the press conference when we were asked about how, whether it was good to have, me playing my 100th game and whatnot. And, it was very much like, oh, this is great for him, great to be around the club and love coaching him type stuff and all that. And it was just like, this is completely not true, of what's going on in the background. And then a number of players got rested in that game. Jared Mullen, who was 19, got made captain. And then again, I hadn't played.
He's from up north, yeah.
Yeah, and I hadn't played 80 minutes all season because I'd been told every week, you can't play 80 minutes. You're not good enough. You're not, you don't have the ability, to do it. When I had done it repeatedly in previous years, and it just led to, I was left out for 80 minutes on that day when we got beat 71-6, and then I said that I'm done. Told the club the following day, or told the club at the airport that I'm coming to see you tomorrow because I'm done, and there was trying to convince me a bit to stay, and then they said that you can't go to any other NRL club. So we'll only release you to the UK. And I obviously dug my heels in and
how'd you get out of this?
And said that, well, if you do that, then you're going to force me into a position where I'm going to have to publicly talk about what's going on.
They wanted you out anyway,
and it wasn't chief and that. I think it was just personality wise we just clashed, and that's okay.
And that's people in business, so it happens.
And it was hard though for someone that was, I suppose, too emotionally attached to the Knights and the community. I think I felt like it was...
That would have been hard, the whole community-based stuff.
So that was hard. But, decisions are made, and that's, I think it was just how it was going about, and also what was happening to my mates around, with the club. And then they ended up conceding and said, okay, well, we'll allow you to get a release. And I never took any money. There was no payout. There was nothing. I just said, I don't want another dollar. All I want is to be able to make my own decisions about where I'm going to go.
Clean slate.
Which obviously changed that night when I got the phone call from Craig Bellamy and was on the 6:45 flight to Melbourne on the Wednesday morning.
Yeah, and what's three things about the Storm, right? We'll start off with Craig Bellamy. Like, he seems like you can see how there's two sides to every coin, right? But you see how his emotions can fire up in the box and he's going off and whatnot. But just what's the general aura about this bloke? Because there'd be so much more obviously to it that you guys are seeing, because you got such a clinical force that has been forever at the Storm. So how was that?
Yeah, fortunate enough. I had the opportunity to be at Melbourne, and they're a fantastic club, and their culture has allowed them to put themselves in a position where they've consistently knocked on the door for titles or won them. With Craig, he has certainly softened over the years. That may not look that way in the box, but speaking to him and watching him interact with players and whatnot now, I certainly think that he's softened a bit, and sometimes grandkids and your life can do that to you. But for Craig, he reminded me a lot of my father with regards to and my grandfather, like very hard but fair and very direct, which is what I liked. I didn't like bullshit around. Just tell me, what I'm doing.
Facts.
Yeah, what am I doing wrong? But it has to be backed in by evidence. Not
100%.
Those types of things. And
not just bullshitting you, it's just to sort of make you work harder or something like that. Yeah.
And so I just loved everything about the club, from getting introduced to all the staff and making me feel like very welcome, to how they treated my parents and every player's parents when they'd come down and watch their son play, or their partners come down and watch them play. And so Craig was hard but fair, direct. He had a good, obviously, coaching staff around him with Michael Maguire and Steve Kearney and Brad Arthur that all came under him in
solid team
in that period of time. And you could just, it's like when you walk into an environment, whether it's the corporate sector or whether it's a team, when you walk into an office or you work into a change room, you can ultimately nearly feel the energy that comes out, and you can, and also if you are socially aware and you take an interest in your surroundings, you can actually see the interactions that are going on, body language, how people are walking around the office or the change room. They're not holding their heads down. They're not walking around sort of on another planet. It was very much like you could see the moment I walked into the first session and in the change room. One, I was welcomed. Two, as Craig said to me, the reason why I was coming to the club was that he'd asked his leadership team whether they wanted to play with me, and they had a couple of injuries at the time, which was Antonio Kafusi had blown out his knee in Origin, and then Mick Crocker was out through injury as well. So they were short of a... he's now the godfather of my oldest child. So there's some similarities between my oldest child and him. They're not genetically connected, but somehow they're connected in that way. But so straight away, when again you're creating an environment where you feel welcome, you feel wanted, but the expectations are clear, and then ultimately you're creating an environment for me to say, well, because you've brought me in and you've allowed me into this, I'm gonna do everything I can to pay you back.
Yeah. And you get the rub pretty quick when you're down there,
yeah. And I truly believe that it is no surprise that you've seen people like Cam Smith and Cooper Cronk and Billy Slater and Greg go on and do what he did at Souths, and many other players that have pursued careers inside the game or outside the game that have been successful because they had been educated and invested in by the club through more than just being a player. That was the key thing.
Yeah, and we'll get into that like a little bit later in regards to, because that's what really interests me, like when it comes to career ending and when it comes to the transition, which is huge for every professional athlete across the board, no matter what it is. But let's just touch, because it's heard again, like you're talking about Newcastle walking away from the community, that's a big thing. But the bloody premiership, when you got all that kerfuffle going on, getting stripped because of the salary cap and all that. So, mate, how did that bloody feel?
Yeah, it was difficult. Well, it came as a massive surprise.
And how did it feel winning? But how did it feel with the follow-through with the strip?
Well, I think winning was like no other feeling that I've experienced, both personally and as a cog in a very big machine, which was Melbourne. It was, and I also thought that due to what I'd gone through the year, and all the hard work that goes in that many people don't see, even my parents, don't see, and you're living, I lived with them right up until the moment I left to go to Melbourne. It sort of gets vindicated by that sort of moment.
Hard work, man.
And particularly with that club and those players and the way they made you feel. Again, it's the game is very much a blur. You remember bits and pieces about the game, but you will never lose the feeling that you had, when you know the game's won and you're looking at the clock and you're going, well, they just dead set can't get us. And then after that, and then seeing my family in the crowd, after scoring a try in the grand final and looking up and seeing, Dad, holding a beer up to the camera and having a drink, like proudest punch and whatnot. And you go, that's really special. And so that was a fantastic achievement for the club. And then obviously a couple of years later, I was playing in England with Hull Kingston Rovers, and I remember coming into training and all the English players are giving me a hard time saying, you guys have been done and, whatnot. And I had no idea that it had happened. I hadn't turned my phone on at that point. And I remember turning my phone on and it had all these messages, coming through. And I rang Mum and said, just make sure that if anyone comes to the house to take the ring, don't give it away. And she told me I don't think they'll be going in my undies drawer. So that was the main thing.
Thanks, Mum.
But it came as a massive shock because at the time, all I know is what my agreement is, which was 2 parts of stuff all. Because I'd left the Knights, they had no room in the cap to speak of to what I was aware. And I think I'd signed for like 20 grand for the remainder of the year and whatnot, and ended up living with someone down there and close to the ground, so I could get there because I just literally up stumps and left in the space of 48 hours. So to hear that was really difficult, but at the same time there was no anger towards the club and certainly none towards any of the players that may have been caught up in it, because ultimately they are in a position where they're making decisions with the information that they've got, and if they've said that that's it, then that's what we can sign you on, then so be it. Now, there's plenty of conjecture still about how the investigation unfolded and how quickly they'd made their decision. That's been and gone now. But I think everyone still knows, particularly within our team, that we won. Certainly can't go into any commentary about other teams and what they were doing at the time. But again, it is what it is, and it's something that still can't be taken away.
And can I just say, regardless of that strip, they're never going to take that feeling away.
No.
Of when you had, you're standing in the grounds, you've won, coming from that 12-year-old at 5:30 in the bloody morning training to winning a premiership with the Storm, Dad in the bloody stands on the beers, enjoying life.
Yep.
Just showing that hard work and perseverance pays off. And so when you're over in England, do they have any sort of anything that's close to what you're doing now with the Rugby League Players Association at all when you're over there?
They didn't really. They had, a semi-functioning organisation that was connected to the GMB. So they're sort of big union body that, that all the workers' unions, sit underneath. But having been a part of the RLPA since, when Tony Butterfield came in around 2002, and then I was the Knights delegate and then joined the board in 2003.
You were in early.
So and part of that first ever collective bargaining agreement in 2003, that really was a significant moment for the game, certainly from my perspective, knowing what I know and having looked at other codes that had collective bargaining agreements or EBAs in place for their players and for the game, because it provided stability, it provided structure, it provided obviously protections for players that had long been ignored, whether it was investments in wellbeing education, minimum wage, insurances, a standard contract that people weren't getting left behind on based on whether or not they were the best player in the club or not. And there was
That's good because it just safeguards everyone, like especially the players.
Yeah, well, ultimately, you don't want to be in a situation where it is predicated on bias around whether somebody should or should not receive insurance compensation or private health insurance or minimum wage or salary. So at that point, there was no minimum wage. So anyone could be just signed on anything. And
that's it. It's not like you go to fair trade and you can look up the scale of players and, how much they should be earning. No. That's difficult,
So that was where, again, you were still seeing a lot of players, through those early 2000s, still doing dual jobs because of the fact that they were literally getting paid what the club was rightly allowed to do through not having a CBA. But again, that was a really massive moment for the game. And when you
and when was that enforced? Like
2003.
That was 2003. Yeah.
And and again, the significant, a couple of the really important things that were led by players there was all the things that were to look after from bottom up, not top down. So when you're looking after minimum wage and looking after wellbeing, education spend and insurances, largely sometimes it's not the top ones that are going to be affected by that. It's the bottom guys that are trying to secure contracts and trying to get deals over the line and investment in their wellbeing and education because they're not going to have necessarily the funds available to them to maybe take time off, after their career ends, which can end at any moment.
Right.
And then 20 years on now where we are, and I genuinely believe we are the premier code in the country.
Yep.
With arguably one of the best collective bargaining agreements in the country.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's reflective by what we're seeing on the field because I think more mums and dads are looking at our game and saying, well, not only one can my boy go down here and have a tremendous career with a lot of the protections and support services that are available to ensure that when he goes in, when he comes out, he's going to be okay. But now with our women's game, with their first ever collective bargaining agreement, you genuinely have two options there. If you're a parent to say, well, there is a career there. We're still a little bit of the way off with women, but a lot of the infrastructure's there. We're just now going to put a little bit. We need a little bit more meat on the bones, particularly around what women are paid in time as the game grows.
Yeah, and it's you can see it flourishing like in each state when it's got to do with the women's game. So where did it get its crux from? Like when you're looking at like where it started with the RLPA, because it's very much based on, I've looked over different sectors and you're looking at, say, if you've got construction, CFMEU, you've got different unions, but where did it come from when, because you've got to have the knowledge and when you're looking at these EBAs or whatever it may be to go, right, well, we're going to put protections in place to make sure that all these players are safeguarded. So where did that all start from? And you've been in early in the game, so just take us through a little bit of that kick-off journey.
Well, the RLPA was...
and can I say where so that I think I already said that, but the inspiration, like where the information come from, where it's like, oh, okay, this is a different sector, but can we take what they know and what they do, which is working great in their sector, but bring it over to ours, whether it's another sport, a totally different occupation. So take us through it.
Well, the history of the RLPA is that it started in 1979, and it actually was started by... one of the legends of the game, and he was a part of a consortium of people, was Jack Gibson, and he was a coach at the time. So to think that a coach who was always very player first was one of the people in a landmark meeting that took place around that period of time to then form the RLPA, and people like your Arthur Beetsons as well. So not only was Arthur, such an incredible and titan of our game for multiple reasons, but he was also very much behind player advocacy and looking after his fellow players, so much so that he was also one of the ones, alongside Dennis Tuddy, that sort of sat out of the game for a period of time when they brought in the restraint of trade when players were unable to move clubs. So if I grew up in the Balmain region, and then I was only allowed to play for Balmain unless I had the sole discretion of the club to release me to go to another club. So that was effectively that was a pure restraint of trade. And Dennis and Arthur were playing for Balmain at the time, and they sat out in dispute because Dennis wanted to go to, I think it might have been Penrith at the time, and Arthur, I believe, wanted to go to the Roosters.
So that's hard, because if you can slot in somewhere else across town.
Yeah. So again, if you look at any other industry and you say, okay, well, I'm a butcher by trade, but then I'm working at this butchery, but then I see this one over here that for whatever reason, maybe my family have moved, maybe that's where I need to move to, or they're offering better support or better services or better pay or whatever, but you can't go there because there's a restriction and you need the authority of your club to go. That's a huge problem.
100%.
So Dennis sat out for 2 years, took on the regime. Balmain ended up allowing Arthur to leave, but Dennis was left, on his own to fight that battle, and then won in the Supreme Court, which then changed the whole sporting landscape in this country, and has been referenced in other countries, where that then led to various players leaving other clubs to be able to, I think, get the game. Well, I truly believe to get to the game where it is now, where you had your Dragons that would win 12 in a row. And clubs would just go on a run, or different clubs would always maintain,
I'm a Dragon supporter, just saying.
So therefore, that was a huge move where you saw, the Coots of the world and others move clubs because they were able to, which then was able to spread the talent across all the clubs. Otherwise, you were only going to ever stay, in that one club. So that was a huge shift from there. But he had no RLPA. There was no union support. So that really broke Dennis. And for those that aren't aware, which we continue to try and promote Dennis every year via our Dennis Tuddy Award at the RLPA for selfless acts, for the benefit of others in the playing group. That is something that is a really unique piece of history in Australian sport. Then it obviously got formed in '79. And then Butsy really picked up the baton and went with it in '03 to secure the first ever CBA. And then I was always very passionate about that because I had a more a labour union sort of background through my father and grandfather, who was coal miner, and his family were coal miners. And my grandfather ended up senior sergeant at Balmain and Eastwood around that period in that area. So they all had representation, and the mines that shut down didn't have representation when my grandfather left Cessnock.
And so that's what's so interesting seeing in sports. Like back when I was in construction, being a part of the CFMEU back then, and just seeing how they operate throughout the nation, and it's great to see it in sports. Just like you said, it's not like you could go to fair trade or anything like that, or where people were restricted to certain spots. So
yeah, well, even now, there's obviously due to our collective bargaining agreement having sort of some distinct differences of what regular employment receive. It's not registered with fair work in certain areas because of the fact that you can't like the salary cap is a restraint of trade.
Yep.
That needs our agreement, and we need to reach agreement on that with the governing body, which we have done repeatedly, because we see it as a way of equalising.
Oh, like if you're squeezing, say, a player in and you need to bump the cap up a few more dollars, is that what you're saying?
We have to agree that a cap is good for the game for XYZ reasons. Otherwise, you would see that you're capping someone's ability to earn.
Yeah, that's right.
And so therefore, because there's only so many spots in a squad, so you've got your 30-man roster, or in the women's it's 24, they all have to fit under this cap. Then you've got sup-list players that go on top of that cap, and dev list in women. And so therefore we have to agree that, okay, that is a fair is a fair salary cap to be able to then players move in and out of and up and down in. But yeah, I mean, when you're preparing for a CBA, you're looking across, all sports, and I'm a big believer in surrounding myself with people with similar values and that are like-minded in that space, and that are sort of principle-based, colleagues, and then experts in their field. And the RLPA now has never been in a better position in the history, where we've got...
You've got some heavy hitters in there.
I've got a fantastic team that have unique skill sets in their various areas, but then when we sort of come together, we form a really formidable team that ultimately, drive, that are fiercely independent, that protect and advance the interests or extend the interests of the players, both current and beyond.
Yeah, and what is, like, as a collective unit, like with the team that you got now, so what's the primary functions and purpose of the RLPA? Like, we look at the collective bargaining agreement, but there's so much more to what you guys do now.
Yeah, I think outside of compliance and obviously, securing the best collective bargaining agreement, which is all the players' terms and conditions, as I said, from insurances to salary cap, to obviously management of integrity matters, to contracts, to obviously women's pregnancy and parental policies, to relocation allowances.
So many people wouldn't think of stuff like that,
Yeah, and so and then as obviously and now we've got our new past player program that's been launched, because the game's never had really a thriving past player program. So now we're obviously providing better support and services for our sort of 0 to 5, 0 to 10 year players, which has been a fantastic addition to our team. So,
and how does one become a member, regardless of age or if it's professional or whatever it may be? So yeah, we represent NRL and NRLW contracted players and past players. So if you don't have an NRL or NRLW contract, you don't fall into our membership. So that's where they are. We've we have effectively 100% membership where players... That was my next question, like how many players are signed up? Yeah.
So players sign on at their discretion and by their choice, and we're proud to say that we would have very close to 100% membership. And those that don't...
That's great.
That aren't members, they would be probably, they may have come in as a rookie and we haven't quite got to them yet, but
whoever they are, they got to get their agent out of their ear.
Yeah, well, it's not.
Hey?
It doesn't have anything to do with
them.
that, but it's more so the fact of just purely that they may have been a rookie, come in, sign a contract, and we're just looking to, and we work through that in our club visits. But again, our membership now, and the players that we represent and the people who that I proudly represent, they are the most educated, informed and committed and motivated group that I've ever had the pleasure of being around, both as a player and now in an administrative role, where they genuinely care about their fellow players, and so much so that the positions that we take are bottom up. We don't. It's not about, okay, let's just inflate the salary cap and let's move money that should otherwise go to past player or insurances or retirement accounts or injury hardship funds, and let's just jam it in the cap to ensure the top 5%, get all the cream.
Yeah, we distribute the funds.
We have to ensure that we are looking across the collective, and again, that's
because there can be massive discrepancies between what, say, Nathan Cleary's earning compared to someone else on the team. And, I get it, but, it can be a lot of money when you're looking at the gaps. So, but as long as you got the guys that are coming through, the rookies, there's some sort of standard that across the board all the teams are meeting, regardless if it's Penrith that have got, one of the richest clubs compared to one of the other clubs that doesn't have so much money.
Yeah, well, I think that often the misconception is that clubs have to pay the players the salary cap. The clubs are a pass through, so the revenue that is generated and the money that goes to players in their salaries, that comes from the game's distributable revenue. So the NRL, which is excluding club revenue, so
Right.
clubs get to keep 100% of their revenue outside of some things that they'll have to spend on with their agreement with the NRL. So they'll keep 100% of their revenue. They get, $4.7 million of cash or margin on top of player payments to run their club and invest as they choose, albeit with, again, a couple of constraints on where they may need to invest. But the NRL pay the salary cap to the clubs. Clubs pass that money on to players. It doesn't come from...
So many people would not know that.
It doesn't come from clubs.
That's interesting.
Clubs then, with their margin and their sponsorship and gate takings, they then will spend on outside of the top 30 in the dev list. So your state cup-based players and your junior reps, those types of things. And your investment in junior rugby league and their junior nursery. That's what clubs will then spend their money on. But they don't pay the salary cap. That comes from the NRL to them, and then they pass it on to players.
Yeah, right. And that's awesome, and thanks for explaining that. So when you look at it from the bottom up, because now you've taken the steps and gone through the RLPA to now CEO, so what were the steps like coming through the ranks, and just what's the everyday like with yourself, Clint, like as a CEO?
Yeah, well, it started really as a delegate in around 2001, 2002, where I was 19 years of age, and the senior players like Joey and BK had said, you can do the shit kicker's job and you can be our delegate, and you just make sure we get the flyers and the info and whatnot, because the RLPA didn't have the strength. But then the players didn't understand
plus the membership and all that.
Collective benefit. But they were also very much, they were conditioned by the years that they'd been there, because no one had sort of shown them the way. And I think the Super League ARL war, I think only further enhanced that mindset where players were getting paid, getting looked after. They looked after themselves. They didn't understand as I said before, the rising boats, type analogy where you're looking after each other, and if you 100%. Do look after each other, then you collectively will benefit, and the game will benefit. So it started there. I joined the board, a year or so after, and was there for a few years before I left, to go to England. I came back. I got asked to get involved in the negotiations in the collective bargaining agreement. In 2012, when I was at Penrith, and fortunate enough, then Ivan and Phil gave me the opportunity to actually go and pursue that, where we were in countless meetings with the NRL about securing that CBA, and if Ivan hadn't have given me the flexibility with my training and being a part of that, I wouldn't have been at the table. And we wouldn't have been able to organise some of the, the biggest hitters of the game to come to the table and advocate on behalf of everyone, because that's what we needed at the time. And so
heavy hitters, as in people within the league.
So we had like myself and Mick Crocker and Cam Smith and Jonathan Thurston and Jared Hayne and Robbie Farah and Paul Gallen, like all these players that were then now coming to meetings because we were able to organise. That particularly myself and Croc, worked through. It was a massive moment, and Dave Shillington and Anthony Quinn, they were all sort of part of that, and Timmy Manor. And so then to be a part of that, we secured another sort of landmark CBA with a number of different things that we'd secured there, like again, like in better insurances and retirement account and protections for players at the bottom end of the list, and increasing minimum wage and whatnot. So we were then I got voted in as general president, which by nature of our constitution you go into onto the board, or you opt into the board, and then I was general president and a director for the remaining sort of years up until 2015, when I sort of I took on the chair's position for my last year of my career, and for the last sort of couple of months of my career was sort of effectively, I suppose, somewhat of an acting CEO while still playing at the Knights.
Yeah, right.
And then we recruited in Ian Prendergast from the AFLPA. He was the 2IC there, and I looked at the AFLPA and I thought, well, they're arguably the strongest in Australia. I was never one to conform to what people would tell me to do, because the mentality was, oh, well, you would never go outside of the game and bring someone in, because that's just not what you do. Yep. But I fully believe that...
Oh, you want the best of class. Well, if it's going to, like going back to the high tide races or boats, canoes...
So I truly believed that that we needed someone that had been a part of collective bargaining agreements that had secured some of the best terms and conditions in the country. Ian was that guy, and that took on a lot in his first few years. He then recruited in, what has now become effectively like my right arm, which is Tim Lyth from cricket. So again, when you go, well, Ian comes in from AFLPA, Tim Lyth comes in from Cricket Players Association, and he'd also helped establish New Zealand player associations for a lot of the codes over there, particularly women's codes. And then me with the Rugby League IP, as well as the trust and confidence of the playing group. You know, I thought the dynamic of the team was there, and anything that they were deficient in from a Rugby League IP, I could fill the gaps. I needed to learn from them because I saw them as the two of the best in the country. And so then we went round and recruited a new board because we were really deficient in a few skill sets, and it was really just a player-led board. We didn't have non-financial directors, so players were...
People from other occupations and whatever. Yeah.
So that was about the diversification of our board and the skill set. So we brought in, someone like a Deidre Anderson, who's now the chair of the RLPA and has been a part of the RLPA since 2016.
How'd you scoop her?
So she was one of our first interviews Brenda and I had.
She's got a pretty extensive history in sport and kicking ass, really.
Yeah. She's a phenomenal woman. Deirdre is very unassuming, but she is incredibly intelligent. She has got the runs on the board. Many of those runs are unseen by people, which...
I reckon people would have got scared when you scooped her in. Yeah, so NRL would have been sort of shivering a bit
so
there.
She was... so Deirdre's been such an unwavering pillar and rock of support for me awesome. In that space. And I've seen many a man crumble in our game in pressure situations, both on and off the field, and the way Deidre had conducted herself during some of our most difficult times during COVID, and then during obviously the collective bargaining agreement, it is outstanding, and the game is better for having her in those positions.
Good.
And then we'd secured a few other key positions like Russell Adams, who has since passed away, unfortunately, through cancer. He became our chair. We had a number of people that got on board there. Nimesh Shah, who was like a finance guru, and Pippa Leary, and we were fortunate to have a very strong board. David Ginger was part of our advisory board, that then led to where we are. Obviously where we are today, and I became CEO in 2020. When Ian departed to pursue other opportunities.
And could you? I know you'd already sort of done it in acting form, but did you feel that extra little bit of weight when you stepped up?
Yeah, I didn't really want the job. I didn't go for it originally. I left myself out of the running because I was thinking, well, I was happy where I was thinking, well, and I had a bit of that, no doubt, probably imposter syndrome, where it was like, well, could I really do it? And there's probably someone better than me at it. Here's a guy that never got a HSC, was borderline dyslexic, that didn't get all these degrees, that doesn't have all degrees on the wall, that type of thing. And there's probably someone else.
Brother, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, and so therefore, but I spoke to my father and mum and my wife, and spoke to a couple of other trusted advisors around that period, and they thought, no, go. They said, no, you go for it. And I think there's always that saying around that there's never the perfect moment to go for a job. Like as a CEO, just the stars are never always going to line up. And so therefore I went for the interview and got it, and then got the job on the Friday, and then the comp shut down on the Monday, with COVID. So it was very quick baptism of fire for myself, where all of a sudden you're finding yourself in the room with major government officials and Peter V'landys and Todd Greenberg at the time.
Because that would have been hard lot with the dollars and cents, what people want to shell out and not, because they're not getting bodies through the gates, like for the tickets at live games. And
well, the challenge is the fact that the game didn't actually have enough cash reserves to keep the lights on longer than a couple of months.
Right. So who can be prepared for that stuff?
So again, well, the game should have. I mean, they had $2 billion broadcast cycles, and the game should have been in a better position than what it was.
Yeah,
and that's been publicly spoken about, and to certainly to Peter and Andrew's credit, over the last few years, they've grown that, and the commission, they've grown that asset, that cash asset base, where the game now will never have to go through what they went through, where really there was so much uncertainty for the industry, where and also
so it's sitting in a positive now. It's not.
Yeah, absolutely, and they didn't have assets to borrow against and whatnot, and now the game is in a position where they don't have any debt. They've got close to $300 million in cash and assets. So it's a fair turnaround, which the players have very much also been a part of, working with the game in understanding how much the game needs to self-insure itself or protect itself, as well as what is by rights theirs, given the role they play in the industry, and then also what is distributed to clubs to be able to ensure they're successful and that they can invest in pathways and participation, as well as the states that obviously receive their clip of the overall revenue that the game generates.
Yeah, right. So when you're looking at pathways and transitions, and I touched on it early in regards to, because you've got all types of individuals that are, with all different types of teams throughout the country, and what they know, what they don't know, and obviously you get to the end of your career and it's like, what do I do? And that can be pretty daunting, like mentally, because if not everybody has a backup plan. So where do you guys slip in if there's any sort of transitional help in any which way or form?
Yes, this is the beauty of having a strong RLPA and having bodies on the ground, is that, and also because of what we secure, it's not just about player salaries, it's about actually all of the funds and services that are in place for the players today have been established by players. So the injury hardship fund that players can tap into if Clint Newton suffers a career-ending injury and I don't have a contract beyond 2025, I now make application to that fund to be able to pay me what I otherwise may have received, if I had been able to sign a 1 or 2 year deal post 2025. Now,
because I'm thinking of that young gun that played for the Tigers, Simon, or where he got hit in the pec.
Simon Dwyer,
and shut all the nerves off to one side. I'm thinking, mate, like. So
again, if we had these things available back then, which then people like Simon and Daniela Tuiaki and a number of other players that have been in situations, and this is, I suppose, what drives and motivates me and a lot of our team and other players, is that you see the carnage that is out there with some of these players, and what you want to do is try and establish funds or vehicles to be able to better support and better protect players, because ultimately this is a job site, this is work.
100%.
And because athletes in this country are excluded from the workers' compensation legislation, so there is no workers' comp available to players.
At all.
So again, obviously everyone...
is there anything in the works in regards to that though?
Again,
it's a bit hard though.
Well, it needs to be a legislative change about whether or not players, and athletes, again, that are a multiplier of revenue generation for the economy, where they, ultimately pay their taxes like everyone else, but they're excluded from various benefits that others received, and that's not a woe is me type story. That's just, again, why we fight so hard in the collective bargaining agreement for our fair share, because we are not doing the right thing by our players if we just tip 100% of the money that we secure into salaries.
Right.
Because like I said, the top will get, looked after, but there'll be a big gap between the top and the middle and the bottom. But you need to prepare for situations like early retirements, career-ending injuries, medical retirements, those types of things that happen in our game and that can happen in our game literally tomorrow.
Yep. And it looks good too, like when you're talking from the people at the top, you got like DCE, Daly Cherry Evans. So you got him and other representatives that are current players.
Yep.
So how does that go? Obviously, because there's a lot of information that they're with their respective clubs and information that they can garner, and then they have a board meeting and say this is what's going on. Like, what does that look like when it's the players on the coalface come to the board meeting and unload? Like, how does all that work?
So obviously, as I said at the beginning, we are an independent organisation, so we sit separate from the NRL or the ARLC and all the clubs and both states. So we have our own board, we are governed by our own constitution, and we have the same fiduciary duties and responsibilities that other directors have. That we're all liable, to make sure that we're running the business the way in which our members expect, and that is in line with legislation. And so therefore we have in our constitution the directors have to be a minimum of 50% players, current players. We are a bit more heavily weighted in favour of players, where it's about a 70%, 30% split. So at the moment we've got Dale Finucane, Josh Hodgson, Daly Cherry Evans, Chad Townsend, Felice Kafusi, Madison Bartlett, Hannah Southwell and Chelsea Lenarduzzi on our board as player directors. And then we have obviously the non-financial directors being myself, Deidre Anderson, Danny Roach, Tim Gordon and Steve Harker.
Yep.
So it's a strong board, but Ches is also our general president. So then how that works is no different to everyone else. We've got a board meeting next week. They receive their board papers, work through it. But then below
what do you do that every 2 or 3 months? Or
every couple of months.
Yep.
And then but below that, what we've worked very hard to establish is our leadership structure, which realistically guides the decision making of the board. So
you want a legacy structure, you want to get this on going.
So we've got your players that standard player that obviously turns up for training, does their job, plays their game, goes home, and whatnot. Then outside of that, you've got your delegates. So that'll be between 2 and 4 or 5 at every club, both women and male clubs. So that's obviously cutting across 29 clubs now. And then our most engaged delegates and those that are wanting to obviously be at the table when bigger decisions are being made and influencing the board's decisions. We have our player advisory group, which we've got almost a representative from every club.
I was going to say you've got a lot of brains that you can draw on from there.
And then above that, then obviously you've got your board. So there is a clear decision-making tree and pathway before we make any decisions that ultimately are going to impact the collective. There are numbers of groups and leadership structures that we'll go through before we make decisions. Obviously, there are some that that players don't necessarily need to be a part of from the day-to-day BAU stuff. But if there are, if they're bigger decisions or decisions that will impact the players' day-to-day life or their club environment or their workload or you've seen with the recent different rule changes or sanctions or whatever, then we will go to, you either go from your delegates and then work your way up, or you might just go to your player advisory group, or it might be just a board level decision. But players must be in control, must really be the masters of their destiny with the non-financial directors there to help guide.
Because ultimately they're the ones affected. So, yeah. So if you had like Greg Inglis or Dean Witters or any mob reach out to you guys and say, hey, we want to jump on with it's being a part of some sort of team, group, advisory, or given a crack at the board or anything like that?
Yeah, so obviously everyone's, all players are available to nominate, to go on the board. Obviously, those guys are now retired, doing a fantastic job. Dean Witters has done a tremendous amount of work in the NRL and the community, and is really blazing a trail as a superior elder in the Aboriginal and Indigenous community, which is fantastic. And it's great to see GI, back in the game again with the NRLW team and at the Tigers, and he's doing some fantastic work. And I suppose the other leadership structures that we've established in the last couple of years is obviously our RAP working group to work through our reconciliation.
So that's good.
Action plan, and then our MANA group, which is our Māori and Pacifica leaders. So we feel like we've got, we're always looking for new and emerging leaders. But we feel like,
and it's whoever wants to step up and,
of course,
have a crack too as well, because that's totally different from passing the footy to getting in and sitting down to business and, so we can look after the rest of the mob, no matter if you're black, white or brindle. We're all on the same playing field here, so we can get the right dollars and cents that are going to look after us now and when we retire and where we're going out into the sunset.
And there are lots of strategic decisions that are made that is not just about financial matters or commercial returns. So that's the other key thing. But I think with whenever there's been an increase in our spend or the clubs across the board really buying into wellbeing and education and players pursuing careers outside of what they do on the field, that all helps build confidence in their ability to then engage in these types of discussions, or vice versa. They build confidence by being a part of these leadership groups, being a part of a board, understanding the mechanics of how decisions are made and how you have to strategically work through things, looking at budgets, P&Ls, ensuring that we're compliant. Risk registers and governance structures, they're all things that again are going to benefit players. Some players, not everyone, post-career, and that's where we've seen a significant rise in our players' interest. Because again, this is a big industry. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry that players are right in the centre of it. And
because the teams are growing, like whether it's memberships, dollar-wise, like they're getting massive. So
so that's why again, our outside of obviously protecting and extending the interests of our members, but it's also ensuring that players that their collective the collective strength is then harnessed. And their voices are heard and valued, at the various tables that they need to. And that is really all it comes back to, because players are the ones that are usually closest to the problems or to the closest to the opportunities to continue to grow the game and to have their voice on various matters, not to run the game, not to be a part of, some of the matters in which the RLC have to manage, but on matters that are going to directly impact them. It would be a mistake for stakeholders not to listen.
Yeah, and you can see your strength there from the bottom up, like when you look on the website of your various different groups and the board, and also some of the partners that you're with, some of the people that have jumped on board with some of the sponsors, and that's a huge thing, and that ain't easy to obtain, and sitting down with executives and getting them to buy in, knowing this is our ethos, legacy structure, to know that these men and now women are protected as a whole. So how's it all been though, just when it's got to do with the world of CTE and head trauma and all that sort of stuff? Has that been a bit of a murky ground, and just with you guys and balancing that out with current players and just, how's all that rolling out at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we have our own policies in place about how we manage, and our positions on various things. One of the main things is that this is a forever evolving space, and it's never going to be a set and forget. It's never going to be a this is the silver bullet for any type of matter that relates to the head or any other parts of the body. I think with this one particularly, the game has never done more when it comes to protecting the interests of the players and the long-term future of the game.
You can see that
with regards to HIA.
That's right.
And the various ways in which they're trying to protect players in that space, delaying their return to plays, the tests that they have to do when they come off, the spotters, the way the video ref is obviously in use, and then the compliance that's required from clubs, and the ongoing work that is in that space where the NRL has their medical advisory panel, which we have a spot on with Dr. Bassam Moses, and then you've got the player safety committee that sits there. So there are various groups and committees that are established at consistently looking and monitoring at, is this best practice? What other things are out there to help work through a complex space, and one that, again, there is a lot of information out there. Some of it is obviously conflicting, and it's about filtering that down without any bias and saying, okay, is this in the best interest of the players and the game? And I think this is, if there was ever a matter where we're very much aligned on with the game, it's about player protection and the way in which we go about head injury trauma and the management of players if they have suffered a concussion. Yeah,
you can see that the NRL are trying to find the balance, and it isn't easy, especially to do with CTE. And like you look at other sports, and obviously it's different if it's combat sports and all that sort of stuff, they don't go jumping down their necks or anything like that, but it's all about finding balance, like that's in any sport, so.
Yeah. And I think the UFC and other codes, they're certainly doing, the UFC have their own protocols and policies in place to manage that. I mean, you've seen fighters that have suffered fairly, or back-to-back concussive blows, or where they've been knockouts, and
they're trying to hold them off.
The time in which they're not allowed to return and whatnot. But everyone 100%. is different. So monitoring people is always one of the key challenges in the space. Is that everyone will respond differently if they have suffered some sort of head injury.
That's right.
And so therefore there is a whole process that different people will work through about their returning to training and managing their sleep to their diet, to ensuring that they're doing everything possible to put themselves in the best position to return. Yeah,
everybody's biology is different, but I think they're doing the right thing and just trying to find balance. So we're in 2025. What's the RLPCA's core mission from now and moving forward?
Well, we've just obviously developed our starting to implement our new strategic plan, which is the most comprehensive strategic plan that the RLPA has ever developed. And again, like I said earlier about the quality of people there, Lena Kakamo, who's our GM of Strategy and Innovation, has done a great job in pulling that together and working with our team in understanding the different areas of our business, from finance to player ops to media and comms, to operations to legal.
It's a lot going on.
There's many different areas, and as well as our past player program, and then all of that has got to align on where do we want to go. The players were fundamental to the development of our strategic plan because ultimately it's theirs. So it's very different from, say, a corporate structure system where the board and the CEO will predominantly work through the strategic plan and then implement, from top down. When it is a player-led organisation where we have to listen to what they see as important for them, both as current and past players, because then they need to be front and centre in the development of it. Of course, we're going to fine-tune it and hone it in a way in which that is conducive to delivering the outcomes in which they want. But it is you have to take a different approach when you're developing a strategic plan. And so again, we, it's up on our website about a lot of the work that is ongoing.
That's where everybody can check everything out.
It's about obviously. About player engagement, leadership development. We've changed some of our values, our past player program. the financial sustainability of the game on the RLPA, and again it's a big few years for our game. Again, we're certainly proud of the role in which the players are playing and in driving the game forward. And I think if we continue to hopefully work together on a lot of the key initiatives, I think the next broadcast cycle is going to be
the next deal,
a game changer for the game as well, because again, the game is in a financially strong position. So then the investment that's required to build the contingency fund that is there is really no longer required. Clubs are very much
just the
clubs are in a very strong and financially sustainable position, given everyone is now in profit land, as opposed to
that's
running
good.
At about 64 million of combined losses.
Jesus,
about over a few years ago. So, and again, they needed more investment in their clubs, and I was certainly a big advocate and supporter of that, because I think having strong and viable and sustainable clubs is better for the game, and obviously then the fans should feel the benefit of that. So it's a big few years ahead. Our leadership development is always going to be key in our players, because of the fact that we want to make sure that we're promoting and producing not just good players and good talent that have good protections, but quality people that are going to help, that are going to have a greater opportunity for employability and success post-career.
Yep.
And now with our past player program there, which is going fantastically well, led by Tommy Simons, and he's got some great people underneath him in Keegs and Joe and Morgan, and they're engaging the players, both male and female past players, in a way that the game has never been able to do before.
Yeah, mate, well said. So that's a lot on the RLPA. And hey, I don't know if I was tripping when I was over in Perth, right? Because I was on holidays, I wheeled past the TV, and I know the NRL had this pre-season comp on, and I don't know if the RLPA had a team.
Oh, yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Were you on the field or what?
I played second year in a row. The Hammy got me in the game before the prelim, but
nice.
It was the Nines tournament up on the Gold Coast at Tugun.
That's what it was.
The lads have done a really good job there, and obviously one of the ex-players in Anthony Mitchell's a part of that.
Yep.
And we put in a team. We were proudly sponsored in partnership with the Mad Hueys, which was fantastic.
Oh, yeah. They're from up that way too, yeah?
Yeah. They're a fantastic group of lunatics that are all but are just good people that have been successful in business by literally transferring everything that they are as a person into business. They're fun, they're loyal. They are incredibly hardworking, but I think ultimately they've got good, strong values. So Heltz and Sean and Dean and co, they're fantastic. Obviously, Knuckles with Country Trucker Caps is one of the sponsors up there, and he's again been incredibly successful, which is great to see. I just love seeing good people that have come from different industries that have said, I'm going to have a rip at something. And then, I'm not going to care whether or not you think that I can get it done. And I'm just going to have a red hot crack. And
fire the odds.
But the tournament went well. It was much more successful than the last year where we didn't win a game, to this year where we were one off the GF. We had a good team
next year.
And I think the lads have already been inundated with some player interest, so it's been great. Moiser and Tyrone Peachy and Chris McQueen and co, they all played well, and Ricky Latelli and whatnot. So Sione,
awesome.
Hauso. So it was a good team, and it was a great bit of fun. Good couple of days up there on the Goldie.
Yeah, 100%. So just want to end the note on, mate. So your old man left a legacy with golf. So do you still get involved in when it's got to do with the golf, in and around charity matches and from what I've seen, and this is just from an outsider, that you still get involved in some of the charitable work about some of the comps and stuff underneath your dad's name. So is a lot of that still running out?
Yeah.
And how do you go behind the clubs these days?
Very much the same as what I was in my early days. Dad would call it army golf, very left, right. So, but obviously with Dad's Jack Newton Junior Golf Foundation that was established in 1986, that's
been going for a while. That's good.
I mean, we're coming up to nearly our 40th year, obviously next year, and we are the longest running and strongest junior golf foundation in the country and across all the states and territories. We're in partnership with Golf New South Wales. That's arguably again the strongest golfing body across the states and territories. And we have every metric that we have is up in the last 12 months. We have a fantastic GM in Dale Hughes that and another awesome team there that go out and put on junior events throughout the 12-month calendar year. And we have our major events from the Harvey Norman Week of Golf to the Jack Newton International up at the Hunter Valley, where we broke records last year.
Do you have it at the Crown up there or where?
Yeah, so we have a number of our major events that are around New South Wales, metro and country regions, from Coffs Harbour at Bombville to Sydney Metro to obviously the Hunter Valley, and obviously we've got different events that are out around Bathurst and whatnot. So we are. But across the board, participation is up over 30% in that space. Our under 12s,
awesome.
Our under 12s are up. Our tournament attendance is up double figures and in the 20% range. And our Jack Newton International, that's the biggest junior event in the country, that has seen the likes of Jason Day and Adam Scott and Cam Smith and Kari Webb and all of those players come through when they were playing. We had over 500 kids, 16 nations represented from across the world, every state and territory there. So it's
you're definitely showing a path for people. That's for sure.
So I mean, it's look, golf. My father was always very big on the values in which golf, taught you from etiquette and respect to trust and honesty, and to work ethic, from holding the flag, to putting the right score down, to replacing your divots, to fixing the pitch hole, to talking to people where you could be a 12-year-old and you're playing with a 60-year-old out on the golf course. And he ran into a lot of opposition starting his Junior Golf Foundation, where Golf Australia and the PGA didn't want Dad starting his Junior Golf Foundation, because they believe that none of the clubs would want juniors playing and cluttering up their clubs on week and weekdays.
Yeah,
and Dad was very much like...
But where are you going to get your pros from?
Well, you're full of shit and you don't know what you're talking
100%.
about, and the kids are the future. And
That's right.
He pushed on, tipped a lot of his own money and Mum's money into starting the Junior Golf Foundation. And now to see where it is with the likes of one of our long-time philanthropic investors is John and Jill Kinghorn, where they've tipped in for well over a decade now to help continue Dad's legacy. But we're always open for other investors to come in and help us continue it on, because again, golf is one of the sports that can link, as I said, a 6-year-old to a 70 or 80-year-old, and you have a handicap and you can play against each other, and it teaches us all things that certainly ripples into your life. And I'm really proud of where we've got to. There's always more work to be done, and there will be more work to be done. But we're in a really strong position at the moment, and we're fresh off the back of a successful 45th The Jack that was broadcast on Channel 9 last Sunday. it'll be shown across Fox over the remainder of the year as well. And, can't thank those two for their support as well, Channel 9 and Fox. And that's just a fantastic 3-day event that is open to all, that really, as Dad would say, that if you don't enjoy yourself there, it's your fault.
Well, Clint, brother, really appreciate your time. And, if you just want to put out in the atmosphere, like if it's got to do with the RLPA, like socials, when it's got to do with the website, chuck all that out, mate, so people can get onto you and find out what the RLPA is all about. Not just that, the golfing side of things to do with the old man. No
worries. And, you can check all our socials. Our media and comms team are fantastic with Joey and Mitch, and so they keep that well updated and informed, and producing some fantastic content. But it's life's good. It's always a challenge. You
getting any sleep, mate, or what?
With outside of that, then you've got your 3 girls, and I've got a wife there that often goes without as well. So we, but it's all for good causes.
100%.
And things that I'm really passionate about and proud of. And again, I don't know whether the old man would allow me to come through the gates upstairs if I didn't continue on his legacy. So we're in a good spot, and we're only going to get stronger.
Brother, appreciate you being a driving force. Eddie.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, mate. See, folks, solid yarn, looking after the welfare of professional rugby league players, male and female, across the board. Love the yarn, Clint. I think it's solid information and education that should be out there, because it's a short period of their life, but it's just making sure it's done right. Like when I'm talking about the professional lifespan of a rugby league player and the solid work he's doing with the Jack Newton Foundation and charity. Solid work. And if you like the podcast, hit that subscribe or follow button. And we've also got a Patreon page. The link is within the description. So if you want to roll with the squad and become a patron, that'd be great. And if you want to get in contact with me, you can get me via Instagram at streetrollandcheetah, or email, one word, streetrollandcheetah@gmail.com. Also got a Facebook page, Keep Rolling with Jake Briggs, so check it out. I'm on LinkedIn, Jake Briggs. And want to thank our sponsors, Permobil Australia, the greatest electric wheelchairs in the land. Wouldn't be sitting in anything else but these 4 wheels right here, and they've got great assistive tech also. So righto, see you on the next one.